The emperor rewarded him and married him to his sickly sister to have children with her, Eric started saying to himself. At the time when my father suddenly talked about marrying Crispin. At the time, I was the only one who had a doubt about it. In fact, it's obvious. Because the story my father suggested wasn't particularly bad for followers and knights to hear. I couldn't get rid of this suspicious feeling. But what is the reason I couldn't get rid of this dubious feeling? So since that day, I have kept secretly pursuing my father. And at that time, I discovered that the bar waitress used to go to my father's residence. For the first time, I encountered my father's behavior that was outside the moral framework. Although it was bitter on the battlefield where the days of life and death pass, I couldn't make something like that a problem. I investigated to see if the woman had an ulterior motive, but nothing in particular came up. So I just tried to hide this incident as something that no one else knows but me. But after the war is over, my father somehow managed then to transport the waitress here. He even made his right hand, Lord Calvinig, to treat the waitress as his second wife. These were very honest feelings. Towards women, I had no choice but to inform my mother of this fact in a letter with evidence. And in the reply that I received from the maid Adele today, which is that the lady does not like receiving reports. At that time, his mother, Talisa, said about her husband's betrayal. Now that we're all old, it's okay to give it to someone else. Better yet, we don't have to meet every night, which is more comfortable. And here, he smiled and said Eric in tension, as she said, if it were a woman from a noble family, it would have been easier, at least launch is common. But it's hard because she doesn't have any contact with the people behind her. With the exception of Sir Kilfani, the former unit commander, who occasionally visited the suburban house, there were no other visitors at all. And here Eric left the message. He says there doesn't seem to be any particularly new information. In fact, my mother's reaction was not strange. Even in my eyes, the relationship between the two. If you look closely from the beginning, I'll find that they were just partners, work, and they build a family together. And if we look at apostasy, but suddenly he noticed that Misa had woken up and he looked at her while she was rubbing her eyes, and when she got up and went to him, he told her, "Are you awake?" And she kept approaching him as he said, "You don't sleep." Kind of. "Do you need anything?" But she didn't answer him, and suddenly she sat in his lap, and Eric was shocked as she started cutting the paper. And here he told her, "Are you curious about this? I don't think it will be very enjoyable," but she took it from her and cut it up. And here Eric started saying to himself, "The princess who always avoided me, she felt happy because you approached me first." But suddenly in sadness he said, "Although I did not think deeply about unexpected situations and feeling grudge towards the king, except I felt a new feeling when I thought she was the person I should live with all my life. And when I communicated with the first knights. Once when I was a child, this sentence not only made me feel responsible, it made I feel proud too. However, I soon faced reality and woke up from a beautiful dream. And no matter how beautiful the words are, the blood alliance of a family is ultimately just a thoroughbred horse for the next generation. So I didn't want anything special from the woman who would be my wife. It doesn't matter if she likes to tear the paper into pieces like these." And suddenly he held it while he was continuing and saying, "It is correct to say that after one realizes his position and responsibility as heir to the family, it doesn't expect much from a relationship with a woman." And here, when Misa looked at a piece of paper and she was going to take it and tear it apart, Eric held her hands as he said, "Misa, stop." Then he took it from her and took it away from her while he was saying, "You can't tear this one." "No, I haven't read it yet." But she kept trying to reach her, and the second day the maid Adele was telling Talisa, "Ma'am, it's almost March. Would it be nice to prepare a separate large fireplace in the greenhouse for this party?" And here said Talisa, "It would be nice to prepare a small fireplace in advance, but it's still colder than in past years." And suddenly Mesa came, and she was telling one of her maids, "Slow down, Your Highness." But Misa went in the direction of Talisa, who surprised her, and suddenly Misa dropped herself to the ground. And here said Talisa, "I've arrived, princess." Then, with a sharp look, she said, "That's weird." Then she looked at the maid and said, "I was told that the princess is always with the maids. Why did you come to me today?" And here Adele said, "God, ma'am, you call the princess like everyone here." Talisa, "It's true, I still don't know what to call her." Then she said to the maid, "The princess, Madame Deli. I don't know much about the royal palace laws because I used to live in the border areas. In this case, how should I address the princess?" Then she said to herself, "Fair enough, I knew." And that's where Adele told her, "Madam, that's why I looked into it." And here, Talisa continued to say to herself, and far from being helpful, "They make no effort to harmonize, even if superficially, Adele." A similar case is said to have occurred before 3 generations. It is said that the head of Edward's house was calling the princess at that time by her name, and the young master calls her "my wife." And here Talisa said, "So should I call the princess by her name as well?" And she said, "I heard that the princess's name is Misa." So she called out and said to her, "Misa." And when Misa heard her, she looked at her and stood up, then smiled at her. And Talisa smiled back. And Dilly, the princess's maid, said, "Oh my God, the princess allowed you to call her by her name." And Talisa said, "Misa, it's a very beautiful name." Then Dilly said, "It seems that the princess likes you. Can I ask you a favor before dinner?" And Talisa understood and said, "That's right. You should go and rest quickly." And Dilly said, "Yes." Then, and she left immediately. And here Adele sighed in tension and said, "No matter what you do, it's not easy at all. I don't want to get stuck just for the reasons, but from what I've heard, the maid Dealey has been hanging around all day, except that she was always making sure of the princess's bath. No matter where Lady Malika goes every day, she can't be seen anywhere in the palace." And here Talisa smiled and said, "It's clear that there's a reason for this laziness." And here Adele began to say, Adele said, "To start with, I think we have no choice but to follow them. Who knows what they're planning to fabricate against us?" And Talisa said, "Yes, that's what worries me the most." And suddenly Talisa put her hands on her head and said, Adele, and the maid said, "Yes, my lady." And Talisa said, "Could you please go and get me some headache medicine? It should be in my bedroom." And here the maid Adele went and took the tray from her. And Adele said to her, "You brought them with the usual medications, right?" And the other maid said, "Yes, I brought what she used to put on the bed." Looked at the other maid and said, "Thank you for your hard work." And when she found Misa sleeping on Talisa, she said to her, "My lady, I brought some headache medicine. I'll put it here first." Then she looked at Misa sleeping and said to herself, "This is strange. I can't believe you're giving your lap to someone like this." And she said, "My lady, are you all right? If the pain is too severe, I will call the doctor." And Talisa said, "This child, you said she's 20 years old, right?" And the maid said, "Yes, that's right." And Talisa said, "Well, it was like this. Yes. I heard that at a young age, she saw more than half of the royal family slaughtered savagely. Then she put her hand on her head and said, it must have been so painful that her mind couldn't take it. And even now she's still being exploited here and there." And here Adele looked at her in tension and said, "My lady." And she didn't finish because Talisa said, "I feel sorry for a beautiful child like this." Then she looked at Misa and said, "Her facial features are like this, and the color of her eyes is also very beautiful. All you have to do is take care of her and feed her well." And here Adele said to herself, "Eye color. When did I last take a good look at this one? Her hair is always down, so I couldn't really see her face properly." So when Misa looked at her, she looked at her and said, thinking about it, "I think their eye colors are similar." So she was shocked and felt tense as she said, "Impossible." And here Misa got up and started rubbing her eyes. And Talisa said, "Misa, You need to fix your nails and comb your hair. Adele was saying to herself, is it possible that the princess reminds you of that child? And here the scene changes to Eric asking the head butler about Misa, and he said that she is with his mother. So Eric said in surprise, with my mother? And the head butler said, yes. Today she stayed with the old lady all morning. And Eric was silent. Then he said to him, okay. And he went to the place where his mother was with Misa. And here Adele heard her say to Talisa, oh my God, my lady, give me this. I'll cut your nails. But Talisa said to her, forget it. It's better for me to do it. And here Adele said to her, oh my God, my lady, you too? And Talisa said, also, if the hand suddenly changes, Misa might be surprised. And here when Eric entered their room, he was shocked and said to himself, what are you doing? And his mother said to him, Eric, you're here. And Eric looked at what they were doing and said to himself, as soon as I entered the room, I immediately felt something was wrong. And here his mother said, ah, I was in the middle of cutting Misa's toenails. It seems very uncomfortable for her to walk. And Eric looked at her in tension and said to himself, her toenails? My mother did that? And here he remembered his childhoods and said to himself, although my mother may feel some empathy for someone in her usual nature, it is impossible to put much sincerity into touching someone's feet in this way. She was originally a very cold person, even towards her own son. Then he looked at her and said, but now there is an expression of tender love on her face so much that I don't know what to do. The only exception to this rule was my late sister Rosie. It was only her that my mother often treated with such love. Perhaps my mother has already seen the image of her daughter Rosie on Princess Misa. And here he went to her and said, give me the scissors and I'll do it. But his mother said to him, no need, I'll do it. But Eric took it from her and said, I'll do it. And at the same time he was saying to himself, if that's the case, is it acceptable to leave my mother as she is? The reason I can't stop these fears. And here he remembered her as he said, because I can't forget how my mother was with Rosie in the last days of Rosie's life. And here he held Misa's foot and continued to say to himself, but do I have the right to interfere in this matter?